A thin layer of morning mist clung to the fields of Normandy on June 6, 1944, when a lone fighter cut across the sky above the channel. Inside the cockpit, a young American pilot felt the weight of a mission that stretched far beyond the beaches below. He was not thinking about glory or destiny. He was thinking about keeping men alive as the largest invasion of the war unfolded beneath his wings. He could not know that within hours his aircraft would fall silent over enemy territory. He could not know that the sleek machine built to protect Allied bombers would become a prize for the very pilots it was designed to defeat. And he could not know that a German test pilot, a man trained to dissect the strengths and failures of every aircraft he touched, would soon sit where he sat and push the machine to its limits. Yet this is what happened. A single forced landing turned a frontline workhorse into one of the most valuable captured fighters of the entire conflict. And what that German test pilot discovered would shake long-held assumptions inside the Luftwaffe and alter the understanding of the air war over Europe. What happens when your enemy flies your best weapon better than you imagine? The air war over Europe had entered a new and unforgiving phase by the summer of 1944. Allied bombers were striking deeper into German territory than ever before, and the success of the entire campaign depended on whether long-range escorts could hold the skies. The P-51 Mustang had begun to redefine that struggle. Its speed, range, and altitude performance allowed American pilots to follow bomber formations all the way to their targets and back home again. But every advantage in war comes with a hidden vulnerability, and on the morning of D-Day, Lieutenant Thomas Fraser encountered his high above northern France while covering a column of heavy bombers. Fraser noticed the first tremor, a subtle vibration that no pilot ever wants to feel. Then the instruments confirmed the fear. Oil pressure dropping, coolant temperature rising. The Merlin engine, the beating heart of the P-51 Mustang, was a masterpiece of engineering, but also a fragile one. A single puncture in the coolant system could turn minutes into the difference between flight and silence. And in the chaos of the invasion, silence meant falling into the hands of the Luftwaffe. Fraser broke formation and began descending through a patchwork of fields and hedgerows. He had no illusions. Below him was enemy-held territory patrolled by troops who knew Allied aircraft were vulnerable when forced down. Yet the engine gave him no choice. He scanned the terrain, found a narrow field that looked flat enough, and committed wheels down, flaps down. A rough landing, but remarkably, the P-51 Mustang held together. The airframe was intact. The propeller unbent. The fighter that had crossed the channel with such purpose now sat silent in the long grass of occupied France. Fraser climbed out and began moving toward the cover of the hedges, hoping to evade capture. He didn't make it far. German troops were quick to sweep the area, and by midday, he was a prisoner. But he was not the only one captured. The Luftwaffe had recovered something far more valuable. Within hours, a specialized salvage unit arrived at the field. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were part of a well-organized system built to retrieve downed Allied aircraft before American or British fighters could destroy them on the ground. They secured the site, drained the fuel, covered the cockpit, and arranged for transport. By dawn, the silent P-51 Mustang was on a train heading east, deeper into German territory. Its destination was Rechlin, the Luftwaffe's primary testing center, where captured aircraft were taken apart, examined, repaired, and if possible, flown. Waiting there was a German test pilot unlike most others. Trained as both engineer and aviator, he had flown more than 100 different aircraft and understood their secrets better than the men who built them. And soon, he would sit in the cockpit of this American fighter, bringing a new chapter of the air war over Europe into sharp focus. Rechlin was quiet on the morning the captured P-51 Mustang was rolled onto the test flight line. The technicians had worked through the night, tracing coolant lines, replacing gaskets, and checking every hydraulic system. They painted the underside and tail in bright yellow, the unmistakable warning colors used by the Luftwaffe to keep their own anti-aircraft guns from firing on captured Allied machines. When they were done, the Mustang looked less like a battlefield trophy and more like a specimen prepared for dissection. Waiting beside it was Hans-Werner Lerche, the German test pilot chosen for the job. By 1944, Lerche had flown nearly every aircraft that mattered in the air war over Europe. British bombers, Soviet fighters, Italian prototypes, even early American designs. He was not merely a pilot, he was a technical instrument, an engineer in a flight suit whose instincts were sharpened by years of examining the strengths and faults of machines built by nations at war. His walk-around took 20 minutes. He traced the laminar flow wing with his fingertips, noting how smooth the skin felt compared to many German fighters. He studied the canopy framing, the layout of the cockpit, the weight of the control stick. Nothing about the P-51 Mustang seemed accidental. Every line, every hinge, every piece of metal carried the unmistakable intent of an aircraft designed to win in the air war over Europe. When he climbed in and closed the canopy, Lerche entered a cockpit built for a different kind of pilot, a pilot who needed to fly long hours far from home, alone with the cold at high altitude. He familiarized himself with the instruments, interpreting the American layout, the measurements in miles per hour and feet. Then the moment came. The Merlin engine turned over, caught, and settled into a smooth, high-pitched idle that sounded nothing like the deeper growl of German power plants. The takeoff surprised him. The acceleration was immediate. The tail lifted quickly. And once airborne, the P-51 Mustang revealed its character within seconds. The controls were unbelievably light. A small movement of the wrist produced a crisp roll, so fast and so stable that Lerche found himself adjusting to avoid over-controlling. At speed, the aircraft did not stiffen the way a Bf-109 or FW-190 would. Instead, the Mustang seemed to welcome velocity. He tested it brutally, loops, barrel rolls, climbing turns at 4 Gs, high-speed dives past 450 miles per hour. The P-51 Mustang never snapped, never broke, never betrayed its pilot. Even near stall, it behaved gently, giving warnings instead of punishing mistakes. To a German test pilot accustomed to fighters that could turn deadly in an instant, this was extraordinary. At 23,000 feet, Lerche pushed the throttle to maximum continuous power. The Mustang surged forward, climbing past the Luftwaffe's own estimates, 410 miles per hour, then 416. This was no myth. This was reality measured by German hands confirmed in German airspace. When he landed, the ground crew moved toward him, eager for his verdict. He removed his helmet, looked at them, and spoke words that would ripple across the Luftwaffe. It is a truly unique aircraft. Yet Lerche's report did not remain within the walls of Rechlin for long. Within days, copies were moving through Luftwaffe headquarters, across fighter wings, and into the hands of instructors responsible for shaping the next generation of German pilots. The message was blunt in a way German documents rarely were in 1944. The P-51 Mustang was not simply an opponent. It was a superior machine. In an air war over Europe already slipping from Germany's grasp, this admission carried the weight of inevitability. To ensure every fighter pilot understood what they were facing, the Luftwaffe relied on a special traveling evaluation unit known as the Rosarius Circus. Its mission was simple: bring captured Allied aircraft to operational airfields, demonstrate their strengths, and show German pilots how these machines behaved in real combat. On one of these days, Fraser's captured P-51 Mustang now wearing yellow undersides and black German crosses, was rolled onto a flight line beside a Bf-109 and an FW-190. The briefing was uncomfortable. Pilots who had spent years hearing that German aircraft were unmatched now listened to an officer explain that the old assurances no longer applied. The P-51 Mustang could outlast them, outclimb them, outturn them, and outrun them. Dismay rippled quietly across the room. Experience in combat had already hinted at these truths. Now, official doctrine confirmed them. Then came the demonstration. 2 German pilots took off in their familiar fighters. A third, a test pilot from the Rosarius unit, climbed into the Mustang and followed. From the ground, the watching pilots saw with their own eyes what Lerche had described. In tight turns, the P-51 Mustang stayed glued to the Bf-109's tail. In roll rate, it matched or exceeded the FW-190. In acceleration and level flight, it simply pulled away, climbing with a confidence that made resistance feel futile. The Luftwaffe pilot said little when the aircraft landed. Silence often reveals more than words. By late 1944, the emotional toll of these demonstrations merged with a harsher reality. German fighter units were losing aircraft faster than they could be replaced, and losing trained pilots even faster. Fuel shortages grounded entire squadrons. Airfields were destroyed by Allied strafing runs. Young men with barely 50 hours of flight time were being sent into a sky dominated by seasoned American pilots flying P-51 Mustangs that had already proven their edge not just in engineering, but in survivability and endurance. Even captured Luftwaffe aces interrogated in early 1945 admitted the truth. In classified reports, they ranked the P-51 Mustang as the most dangerous American fighter, praising its speed, agility, and relentless presence over the battlefield. Some confess that escaping from a Mustang required a head start and luck. Others simply refused to engage unless forced. Meanwhile, the man who had revealed so much, Hans-Werner Lerche, the German test pilot who evaluated the captured Mustang, survived the war. He later wrote that the aircraft was not an enemy to him, but a brilliant design worthy of respect. A design that, in the end, helped erase the Luftwaffe's chances in the air war over Europe. To understand why the P-51 Mustang reshaped the air war over Europe, one must look beyond the cockpit and toward the broader machinery of American strategy. The aircraft's success was not the product of a single innovation, but rather the convergence of engineering brilliance, industrial power, and an evolving understanding of what air superiority required. When the United States committed to strategic bombing, it faced a simple truth. No bomber force could survive without a fighter that could stay with it all the way to the target and back. The P-51 Mustang finally delivered that capability. The turning point came with a decision made far from the battlefield. American officers in London recognized that the Mustang's airframe, sleek, aerodynamic, built around a laminar flow wing, had untapped potential. Once fitted with the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, the aircraft became something entirely new, a long-range escort fighter that could climb with the best German interceptors and still chase them home. When these Merlin-powered fighters reached Europe, the strategic balance shifted almost overnight. Then came Jimmy Doolittle's tactical revolution. Upon taking command of the 8th Air Force, he abandoned the rigid escort doctrine that kept fighters tied to bomber formations. His message was clear: destroy the Luftwaffe at its source. With the range and performance of the P-51 Mustang, American pilots could sweep ahead of bomber streams, hunt German interceptors, and even strafe airfields before enemy fighters ever took off. The Luftwaffe, once a formidable shield over the Reich, found itself forced into a defensive posture it could not sustain. Industrial capacity amplified this shift. While Germany struggled with shortages of fuel, aluminum, and experienced pilots, American factories produced Mustangs by the thousands. Training pipelines created pilots with 200 hours in the air before they ever entered combat. Against them, Germany sent boys barely trained to fly, let alone fight. Even the most seasoned German test pilot could not overlook this reality. No amount of engineering expertise could compensate for a system collapsing under its own deficits. Globally, the lesson was unmistakable. Technological advantage mattered, but only when paired with production, training, and strategy that exploited that advantage fully. The P-51 Mustang embodied this integration. It offered the Allies not just a better fighter, but the momentum needed to reclaim the skies. And as the world watched the Luftwaffe's decline, the Mustang became a symbol of how modern air power could decide the fate of nations. In the final year of the war, when the skies over Europe had become a vast and unforgiving battleground, the P-51 Mustang emerged as more than just a machine. It became a fulcrum, an instrument upon which the balance of the air war over Europe finally tipped. The aircraft that Lieutenant Thomas Fraser was forced to abandon in a quiet French field ultimately told its own story through German hands, its capabilities laid bare by a German test pilot who had no allegiance to anything but truth and engineering. And in that truth, the Luftwaffe confronted a reality it could no longer escape. The Mustang's legacy was not built on myth. It came from measurable performance, the range to escort bombers deep into the Reich, the speed to dictate the pace of a fight, and the handling that allowed even average pilots to survive situations that would doom them in other fighters. But its impact ran deeper still. It arrived at the precise moment the Allies needed it, when German industry still produced aircraft but could no longer replace trained pilots when fuel was running dry, and when the Luftwaffe's seasoned veterans were being lost faster than new ones could be trained. Against this backdrop, the P-51 Mustang did not merely outperform its opponents, it outlasted them. Yet amid all the technical comparisons and tactical evaluations, there remains the human side of the story. Fraser, who never saw his aircraft again, carried the weight of captivity until liberation. Lerche, the German test pilot who flew the captured Mustang, survived the war to reflect on the machine he once evaluated with professional detachment. Both men lived long enough to understand that the technology they encountered shaped not only battles, but the destinies of nations. And perhaps that is the final lesson. Wars are not decided by one aircraft or one pilot, but by the convergence of courage, innovation, and the willingness of societies to learn, adapt, and endure. The P-51 Mustang simply embodied all of those qualities at a moment when the world needed them most. As we look back on the air war over Europe, the question remains, what do we carry forward from the machines and the men who fought there? Which lessons still echo in our own world, and which ones have we yet to learn? If this story has given you something to reflect on about history, technology, or the fragile balance of war, feel free to share your thoughts below. And if you want to continue exploring the decisions and designs that shaped our world, consider joining us for the next chapter.